Hello, children and grandchildren. Today, Grandpa's going to show you a telephone that is 100 years old. This telephone was used when Charles Lindbergh was about to make his flight all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and all the way to Paris. And it's called a field telephone. And here is a commemorative plaque, right here, a commemorative plaque that records the event. There are also some things on the sides that are kind of interesting. I want to show you this. I want to show you this. This is actually a connection that today this can be used like a regular telephone. And we're going to see that in just a little bit. Now, this opens up. It has a lock here and a lock here. And then it opens this way. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Here is a clock. Here is a map. Here is a speaker area where sound comes out. Here is a telephone. And here are all kinds of buttons which Grandpa will explain to you what they are. By the way, this could only be talked to. The people on the ground could only talk to Lindbergh when he was in the United States. When he got over the ocean, he could not talk to anyone. Isn't that interesting? Only when he was in the United States could it be used. But it was very valuable in that segment of his flight. Now, here's a telephone that looks very much like some telephones today, very much like them, but it looks a lot like, exactly like, the telephones from 100 years ago. Now then, look at all these buttons. These buttons were used so that people on the ground could communicate with an airplane in the air. Just so you know, Grandpa worked for the airlines for 33 years. And we had many very sophisticated means of talking with the pilots from the ground. And it worked very well. But it took a long time to get those systems to work, both in the airplane and on the ground. Now, let's look at another feature. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, asterisk, 0, pound. When the ground crew that was supporting Charles Lindbergh, when he was flying in the United States, they were interested in knowing how is the engine on the airplane running? How is he feeling? What is the weather like where the airplane is? And he could tell them what his condition was. And everyone would feel secure that everything was going right the way it was. Now, I'd like to show you another feature of this here. This, if you can see this, and it's probably a little bit hard to see, but there are little red buttons here that go across here. That is actually the route that Charles Lindbergh followed in his flight from New York to Paris. Isn't that interesting? And they put that right on this communication device to show where he would be when he left the United States, but he couldn't communicate with the people on the ground once he got over the ocean. Now, I'd like to show you another feature. Right here, and here, and here, and here. Memory. Store. Flash. Radio. Redial. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how they would use this. The people on the ground would have this, and as I showed you before, it's called a field telephone. They would be on the ground, and if they wanted to talk to him in the airplane, they would pick this up and they would push a button here that would perhaps say on off, and they would begin to talk to him. They would speak into this portion of this, and they would listen in this. This goes up to the ear, this goes in front of the mouth. Like this. Mr. Lindbergh would have a similar device in the airplane, and he would be able to talk to them. So he would talk about what the weather was like, or whatever was interesting that he thought they should know. And they would talk to him, and they would tell him or ask him questions about things that they were interested in or needed to know. And that's the way it worked. Let's look at another feature. I want to show you this. This. This is an on and off switch. And this is also an on-off switch, but it only works in one direction. Let's look at this. This is the speaker volume. This is the ringer volume, so that the people on the ground can know when the pilot wants to talk to them. Now, there was something I actually forgot to tell you earlier. Charles Lindbergh had to have an airplane, of course, and he had this airplane manufactured in California, and then he had to fly it all the way across the United States to get it to New York. Now, this airplane that he had, if you wanted to see this airplane and you happened to be with your parents or somebody later on in Washington, the actual airplane is in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. But interesting thing is that there are replicas of that airplane in many airports around the country. They are replicas of it, but they are full-sized, and they're very interesting to look at. One of them is in the airport in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but there are other ones around the country. I hope you enjoyed my story about the box and about Charles Lindbergh and his flight across the Atlantic Ocean and his airplane. I hope you have a good day. I love you. Goodbye.